I'm Alex Taylor, and I am fortunate enough to work at what I think is the greatest company on earth, Cox Enterprises. It's great for a lot of reasons. It's a fun and dynamic environment. It attracts great, amazing, interesting people who I enjoy being with. But more personally, it is a family business. It's my family's business. It was started 125 years ago by my great-grandfather. And that, in and of itself, makes us unique. Most family businesses don't survive through multiple generations. Only about 3% make it that far. Why is that? What happened along the way that helped us beat the odds? I've always believed that part of it is about the fact that this company is about more than just turning profit. It was founded on the idea that we can make the world a better place. We can make a difference in our communities. And I believe that's what we're still focused on today. We believe that if you treat people well, if you're guided by values, if you do what you know to be right, that you will foster a culture that's a great culture, capable of thriving and evolving into the future. And that's what we've always done, and that's what we're trying to do today, to build off the amazing story that you're about to see and to set the stage for future generations to make a big and positive impact on our world.
This voice will plant in the hearts of men a philosophy that will help them to see divinity in sunshine and shadow.
I always tell people it's the genesis of the entire company.
That just, goes back to that's where we started.
I wonder what he would think. The company has his name. He created it. And so I think he would be proud.
In 1898, a 28-year-old school teacher was about to make a monumental purchase and take the biggest risk of his life. Fueled by an entrepreneurial drive and the unwavering support of his tenacious mother, this young educator was determined to get into the newspaper business. He believed he could make a profound, positive impact on his community by using a newspaper as a platform to inform and to educate a broader audience. And he found the perfect place to hang up his shingle. He would buy a struggling paper called the Dayton Evening News. The asking price, you may wonder? $26,000, almost $1 million in today's money. There was just one problem. Like most 20-somethings, he didn't quite have that kind of cash under the mattress. He also had, no real business experience or formal training, and he had a growing family to support. Okay, that may actually be several problems. Still, he was unflinching in his quest to make his mark and forge his own path. This ambitious young man's name was James Middleton Cox, who in 1898, through a bold act of personal reinvention, founded the company that would ultimately become Cox Enterprises. The bet Cox made just before the dawn of the 20th century more than paid dividends. It kicked off a journey of bettering communities, pioneering innovations, and deepening connections, a journey that continues to this day, even 125 years later. Where we've come from has everything to do with where we're going. So let's go back to where it all started. A humble farm outside America's cradle of innovation, Dayton, Ohio.
James Middleton Cox was born in 1870, the youngest of 7. Spending his formative years on the cherished fields of the Cox family farm sparked his lifelong love for the natural world. Young James grew up with an enduring admiration and respect for his mother. She was a strong woman who imbued in her youngest son an industrious spirit, the courage of his convictions, and an unstoppable determination. Driven by his mother's remarkable example, James yearned to do something more. After all, it was an era of rapid innovation. Within the first 10 years of his life, the light bulb, the phonograph, and the telephone were all invented, opening exciting new avenues of human connection. Progress wasn't just calling, it practically was ringing off the hook. And so, an inspired James Cox ventured beyond the farm to become a teacher.
Cultivating young minds was a profound experience for him. He witnessed the transformative power of education to shape human nature, impact communities, and help solve life's big problems. As his passion for imparting knowledge grew, so too did his fixation on newspapers. Cox saw the press as an opportunity to educate at a much greater scale, spark meaningful debates, and accelerate the spread of vital information. So, he began his part-time work as a reporter for the Middletown Signal. Cox was fiercely independent, so just getting his foot in the door wasn't enough. He had a burning desire to start a newspaper business that he could call his own.
But he also needed employment at the time, and an opportunity came when business and politician Paul Sorg offered him a job. So he did what any reasonable person in need of money and with a family to feed would do.
He turned down the job offer.
Instead, with a bit of ingenuity, a lot of persistence, and his power of persuasion, Cox convinced Sorg to invest in his dream and secured the funding he needed to buy the Dayton Evening News through a loan from Sorg and selling stock in the paper. And just like that, our company was born.
Even in those early days, he tackled the pressing issues of the time and covered what was most important to people's lives. Among countless instances, one standout moment was when Cox cast a spotlight on the shady dealings of the most powerful political players in Dayton. Exposing this corruption was a daring and risky move, but it cemented Cox as the crusader for the people. It wasn't too long before the once struggling paper was gaining readership and turning a profit. Within just 4 years, Cox bought out his investors and secured private ownership, allowing him to run the business as the people's paper and remain a strong, independent voice.
He diversified the publication's voices and topics, adding a female editor, largely unheard of at that time, and expanding coverage of national and international news. Cox was heavily interested in public policy. He saw how government, if run effectively and held accountable to the people it was serving, could use its resources and scale to reshape communities for the better.
After spilling much ink about the government in the pages of his paper, Cox made the leap from the press room onto the political stage. In 1908, he was elected to the US House of Representatives, where he served 2 terms. Then in 1912, he was elected to the first of 3 terms as Ohio's governor. One of his biggest causes centered around protecting workers. He specifically fought for worker safety and fair pay and against child labour. Cox understood that an employer's greatest and most important resource is its employees, something that remains one of our core values to this day.
Governor Cox's leadership was put to the test early in his tenure. In 1913, devastating floods hit Ohio, leaving a trail of destruction. Cox responded decisively, leveraging local and federal resources to help his state recover. He also spurred the creation of a regional disaster preparedness plan with the Miami Conservancy District, safeguarding future generations from reliving this type of calamity. His effective management of the crisis earned him national recognition and a reputation as a resourceful leader with a long-term vision of the future.
With a commitment to serve as many people as possible, Governor Cox set his sights on the presidency, earning a Democratic nomination for the 1920 election. Cox ran a progressive platform that embraced the international community and supported the League of Nations, an early precursor to the UN. This was forward-thinking for the time, but it was a bit too forward-thinking to win a nationwide race. Cox's optimistic global vision didn't click with the inward-looking nation that was still reeling from World War I and the Spanish flu pandemic.
Cox lost in 1920, but it wasn't a total defeat. The election greatly advanced the political fortunes of his running mate, a man who also fought for workers' rights, environmentalism, and global cooperation, named Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
And as for Cox, he turned disappointment into renewed energy and optimism about the future, determined to use our company as a platform to reach and impact as many people as possible. Our newspaper business was booming as we grew our operations in major markets like Atlanta and Miami, over 1,000 miles from our first home base in Dayton. For a man who once said, "Printer's ink had moved into my blood," staying put in print would have been the safe and expected move. But just as Governor Cox had reinvented himself from an educator to an entrepreneur to a politician, he decided once again to take a calculated risk after his 31-year-old son, Jim Cox Jr., suggested we expand our holdings into an exciting yet unproven new medium, radio. Although he was apprehensive at first, Governor Cox embraced the potential that radio represented.
May I express this christening sentiment, that this voice will always be an instrument of dignity, culture, and practical service.
Radio gave us a major boost, and we ultimately grew to 80 stations across the U.S. It also kicked off our persistent practice of leveraging technology to unlock new ways of communicating ideas. And in 1948, this legacy would be dialed up yet again through the sights and sounds of television.
People across Atlanta were buying televisions based solely on the promise of the new medium, but nothing to watch on them yet. Imagine buying a smartphone that was just a blank screen until somebody miles away flipped the switch.
WSB television is on the air.
Cox had launched the first television broadcast in the South in September 1948, and those early adopters of TV finally had something to watch. Radio and TV facilitated real-time conversations, amplified important voices, and created connections, fostering a sense of unity during our country's most critical moments.
With these platforms, our reach was bigger than ever. But so was our responsibility to better the communities we serve. Throughout our history, we've embraced this role by informing the public, defending freedom of speech, standing up for representation, and speaking out against injustice when it's mattered most. Like when tragedy struck Peachtree Street in October 1958. A bombing at a temple shook the heart of Atlanta's Jewish community. This senseless act of terror prompted Ralph McGill, publisher of the Atlanta Constitution, to write 3 pages that smoked with anger and shame, decrying the hate crime and earning him a Pulitzer. Taking these stands is a tradition we're proud to continue, whether it's against hate and intolerance or for freedom and inclusion. This isn't about doing what's trendy or popular. In fact, the right thing to do can often be met with opposition. When we made Jocelyn Dorsey the first Black anchor in Atlanta, it was radical at the time. Leadership and the family firmly supported this move, but they appreciated the weight of the decision.
They were so afraid of the backlash of putting an African American on the air. And so they went to Mrs. Chambers and asked for her blessing. She said to them, "What took you so long?"
This commitment to increasing representation was a nationwide effort, including hiring more Black journalists across our media outlets. Early in his career, Jim Kennedy saw firsthand how diverse voices were a crucial asset.
I just felt like if we wanted to serve a diverse world, we better have a diverse workforce doing it. And why narrow our choices down to just one group or another? That's just stupid.
Kennedy would later become the chairman and CEO of Cox Enterprises. These are just a few examples of our steadfast commitment to doing what we know deep down inside is right and putting people first. That's a commitment we continue to carry to this day.
Now, by the 1960s, business was better than ever with papers, radio, and television. But as Governor Cox once famously said, running water never grows stagnant. So we kept running, staying curious and trying new things, such as connecting consumers to content and information through new technologies like cable. We were one of the earliest cable broadcasters, starting in 1962 with a scrappy upstart operation in central Pennsylvania. Initially part of Cox Broadcasting Corporation, which also included our TV and radio properties, this cable business laid the groundwork for explosive growth over the next few decades as we expanded across 18 states. Reflecting our commitment to serve an ever-growing mix of customers, Cox Broadcasting was listed on the New York Stock Exchange in 1964, taking the company public. 4 years later, we placed our growing cable operations into a subsidiary, which would later become Cox Communications.
Our decision to participate in the growth of the communications business is an example of innovation and commitment.
But innovation can be messy, and it can lead you down some paths that don't bear fruit.
Sound speed?
From the 60s through the 90s, we made our entrance into the glitzy world of TV and movie production. Through both homegrown efforts at Cox Broadcasting and acquisitions like Bing Crosby's Productions and Reicher Entertainment, we dabbled in everything from producing to special effects. Some of the successes were almost as big as the hair. But we never felt at home in Tinseltown. The hit and miss business left us with little control of our fate, and aspects of the industry weren't compatible with our values. And so the credits rolled on our Hollywood experiment.
Fortunately, also in the 60s, we were turning toward an industry that was revving up: the U.S. automotive business. In 1968, two executives at Cox Broadcasting spotted an opportunity to move into this lucrative market. Their plan? To acquire Manheim, an intriguing business making a pretty good return selling used cars through its auction lanes for a cool $6 million. They just needed the blessing of Jim Cox Jr., who by then had become the chairman of Cox Enterprises. Understandably, he was both cautious and a little perplexed at first. Automotive, were they serious? Automotive wasn't even an adjacent business for Cox. It felt like a completely different universe. He wanted to make sure we wouldn't be stuck spinning our wheels in an unfamiliar sector. But Jim Cox Jr. knew from firsthand experience how important trusting his leaders and being open to new ideas had been to our success up to that point. Much like how Jim Cox Jr. himself had convinced his father to expand into the uncharted territory of radio, these executives made their case and instilled him with confidence in the plan. Cox purchased Manheim Auctions, paving our way into a new major sector and beginning the next chapter in our story of always-on reinvention. As we gained traction in the automotive world over the next few decades, we also gained some unwanted attention in the form of competitive threats from the likes of GE Capital, who was trying to create its own auction business to take down or to gobble up Manheim. So their CEO approached Jim Kennedy and asked to buy our little auction business. But he didn't accept the offer. Instead, Kennedy challenged our team to outperform a tough competitor. He had faith that our people knew auctions better than anyone else. And within a couple years, we bought their little auction business. Manheim is now the world's largest wholesale marketplace, with more than 120 traditional and mobile auction sites and diverse digital channels across North America, Europe, New Zealand, and Australia. But GE wasn't the only threat we faced. We also defended our turf when the New York Times expanded into Atlanta, attempting to seize our flagship market. Thanks to the tenacity of our people, we forced the Times to retreat out of Atlanta by 1992.
Our resilience is rooted in our readiness to innovate and disrupt, even if that means disrupting ourselves. In 1997, our newspapers had a thriving car classified business, but a massive shift was on the horizon with the advent of the internet. This created a potent opportunity to combine our deep expertise in automotive with our evergreen willingness to embrace new technology. Cox CEO David Easterly and Mannheim CEO Dennis Berry pushed the automotive marketplace from print into pixels with autotrader.com, completely revolutionizing how buyers and sellers connect.
Shopping for a used car will never be the same. Welcome to autotrader.com.
While one part of the business took a hit as dealers abandoned newspaper classifieds, another part of our business was ready to capitalize through innovation.
That was considered part of the culture of Cox, that it was okay to fail, but not too often. And it was part of what they wanted from us, was to be innovative and to find new ways of doing things.
Over the next few decades, we would go on to bring AutoTrader and Mannheim together, cultivate an array of businesses spanning the entire automotive sector, and ultimately create Cox Automotive. By 2001, we had set our sights on our next bold reinvention, becoming the largest cable system in the country by acquiring AT&T Broadband. But after months of negotiations, we lost the deal. This was a blessing in disguise, as it was a chance to take stock of the company's direction. We decided to invest in ourselves and return to our roots as a family business. In 2004, Cox took the business private again through an $8.4 billion deal, which at that time was the largest such deal in U.S. business history.
Cox was once again a family-owned company. This is one of the most remarkable aspects of our story. Our founder had a vision that he hoped would span generations. But we know how family businesses can be. Few make it beyond a generation or two, and they're often rife with sibling rivalries and struggles for corporate control. But in the Cox family, things are different. Working together, the family has created a sense of unity and collaboration that has endured for 4 generations, a feat only 3% of family businesses achieve, making Cox extraordinarily special.
Working for a family and a privately held company, and for a family that's been in control for 125 years, is more amazing than people realize. While I always knew this, the one thing I'd like to say is that now working with family members, they care more than you think they do.
Being a private, family-owned enterprise has allowed us to operate with the long term in mind, for our business, for our people, and for our planet. When the James M. Cox Foundation was formed in the late 1950s, its purpose was to support communities in which Cox Enterprises has a presence, with a strong emphasis on human services, environmental, and conservation organizations. This focus on environmental sustainability was ahead of its time. As the foundation continues to this day as a force for good, we've also carried on that environmental cause with programs like Cox Conserves, an initiative spearheaded by Jim Kennedy, focused on solving waste, water, and carbon challenges across our operations and in the communities we serve. And in recent years, our commitment to sustainability has fundamentally altered the shape of our business. We're now making strides in clean tech to revolutionize solutions to energy and waste challenges. With Nexus Circular, we're cleaning up landfills by transforming hard-to-recycle plastics into renewable resources. Cox Automotive is forging the future of green transportation with electric vehicles, groundbreaking battery technology, and shared fleets. And we're even nurturing our roots with Mucci Farms and Bright Farms, both leaders in producing healthy produce in greenhouse environments to feed a growing population.
Our identity and the values we hold dear were forged early on. Throughout our history, we have relied on both to weather world wars, the Great Depression, the Great Recession, and industry-shaking upheavals. Our people and our principles have remained resoundingly resilient.
Along the way, we've been dealt some tough hands, like in 2019, when the shifting media landscape meant being a regional media company wasn't the most strategic path forward for Cox. We made the painful decision to sell our TV and radio stations and most newspapers to ownership that was better suited to take them to that next level. But the toughest hand of all may have been dealt to all of us in 2020 with the global pandemic. Regardless of unprecedented business dilemmas and new operational challenges at every turn, we were determined to keep our employees safe and healthy. We adapted, modernizing systems almost overnight that were expected to take years. Our team was on the front lines, making sure that people stayed connected and healthy in a time that was desperately needed. Relying on the values and culture that we've cultivated for well over a century, our company endured and we emerged stronger together.
Today, we continue to find new opportunities to shape the world for the better and foster human connection. As we stand on the threshold of a new era, we face the question, what is the future of Cox? After 125 years, what's next? Where we've come from has everything to do with where we're going.
James M. Cox was a farmer who cherished the land. He was an editor who harnessed the power of the press. He was a public servant devoted to good governance. But most of all, he was a compassionate leader and a fierce advocate for those around him.
When Governor Cox passed away in 1957, one of the most valuable things he passed down to his descendants was a clear directive. Take care of the people in the company, uplift the communities we serve, and strive for a better tomorrow. We continue to embody his mandate more than ever as we boldly stride into the future.
With our 34 by 34 initiative launched in 2020, we are building on our legacy of creating tangible social impact with a goal of helping 34 million people live more prosperous lives by 2034 by tackling problems we're uniquely suited to solve.
Cox Communications is reimagining connectivity, fostering human relationships in innovative ways, and paving the path for safer, smarter communities.
Cox Automotive is driving mobility into tomorrow, accelerating progress toward our vision of an autonomous, electric, and connected future.
Cox Enterprises is advancing sustainability, cultivating a sustainable environment with clean technologies, as well as sustainable business models, breathing new life into the news industry, and creating smarter digital coverage for a rapidly evolving world.
With Dayton Daily News, the AJC, and now Axios, we're scaling our work to defend a free press and advancing independent investigative journalism both nationally and locally in major markets like Atlanta, Chicago, and San Francisco.
In healthcare, in government, in education, and across all of our sectors, we will continue our tradition of reinvention and disruption, using innovative technology to tackle problems that have existed for far too long.
In 1898, a young man risked it all, driven by a dedication to build a better tomorrow for his community. That drive continues to propel us forward. As we look towards tomorrow, we're not just envisioning the next 125 years, we're shaping them into a future that's brighter, better, and more connected.